All right, everybody, here we are. Regular time, regular day. I know we threw everybody off yesterday, but welcome to.
And stuff.
Yeah, tonight we have DJ Chichester, or I like to call him. He's a good friend of mine, Dan.
Mr.
Writer
Dan.
of Daredevil Fall from Grace. My hand disappears, but it's right up here. We're going to get into it. A lot of other things. It's going to be a lot of fun. We will see you all in about 2 minutes.
I am telling you, it is the definition between an entrepreneur and an employee. The employee goes to the cliff, looks over the cliff, says, is there a balloon down there? Do I be safe? What happens if it hurts? What if I land on my neck? The entrepreneur, they said, we need to jump off the cliff, backs up 10 feet to get a fucking run.
This town needs an enema.
Fuck.
Julio! Where's Commissioner Gordon?
Come on, you guys can beat me.
Too stupid!
You don't really think you'll leave. Things change.
You got me? Who's got you?
Everything changed. And anyone who tells you different is just lying.
You know who this is? This is Mark motherfucking Sylvester.
Okay, that was a fail on my part. Let's there we go.
Start it over?
No, we're good. I just forgot to bring us in, like unprofessional. I'm just sitting here. I'm like, okay, we're good. I'm like,
You're
oh, yeah,
zoning out.
I got a job I gotta do.
I don't do anything like that.
That is true. How you doing, man?
Doing great, brother.
Ever since I saw you.
I know, so long. How's the fam doing?
It's going good. It's going
Nice,
good.
nice.
Now, if you guys missed the special show we did on Tuesday, we looked at Batman 159, which I actually thought was a really, really good episode. And I think Sean's coming around to that story. Maybe we move some people in the chat as well. I don't know.
Slowly but surely, it's a lot better than the first one. I'm hoping.
Yeah, it's going to be good. But, tune in next time. We have that. Next month, we're going to do it again. 160 is going to come out. We're going to dive into it. We'll try to get it scheduled up.
Yeah.
Tonight, though, we're going to have a really fun show. One of our fun returning guests, people we love to talk to, are going to be in the chat or in the show tonight. We're talking about Daredevil Fall from Grace, which I am unfamiliar with when it comes to, I never really read it. And you know me, I didn't really read a lot of things back in the day. I know the story. I followed it a little bit, but I'm really interested to jump into it. I know you went through it. I want to talk to Dan as far as him being the writer of it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
A little bit into that, and also I want to find out what he thinks of the new Daredevil Born Again TV series. So I know it's kind of divided the fan base.
Well, you can't make everybody happy.
That's social media. That's the day and the age of people. You can't please everybody. I actually liked it. It was a very clunky show, but I liked it.
It wasn't perfect by any means, but I did enjoy it a lot more than I thought I would, and I can't wait for next season.
Yeah, and I'm easy to please.
Make me a sandwich.
Yeah.
Let's
say hi to the chat real quick. We got Mark Penguin in the chat. Number one in the chat. Number one on our hearts. That makes you. Where's the hell is it at? Oh, I'm all unorganized today. Number one.
You're number one.
There you are, my friend. I also made this, Mark. If you missed the last show, that's for you.
Mr. Penguin. A penguin is a bird that cannot fly. I am a man. I have a name.
And that name is Mark Penguin. Everybody, remember that name. We got Hail the Lore in the house.
Hail to the king, baby.
Yes. Yes, Heath Ward, Cosmic Studios in the house,
brother.
member of the channel. Great to have you here. And we know that when the members are in the channel.
Oh my god! I'm sorry! I can't stop coming! I'm sorry! Oh, it feels so good!
Feels so good to have the members in the chat tonight. Thank you as always. Cosmic Studios. Duck Bacon's in the house, one of our really awesome artists that jump in here with us all the time. Great to see you. But look who is here. Another writer.
Lobo.
Another writer. Zaid. Phil Diaz in the house. Good to see you, brother. Blue Boy Comics is in the house.
Blue, you're my boy.
Great to see you, man. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have K. Ojo here as well. Greetings from Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, cool.
Yes, sir. As always. Another man here. Christopher Bouchard in the house. Welcome, my friend. Thank you for joining us tonight. Guys, we're going to have a very fun time. I do believe... Oh, there he is. I almost missed him. We were about to start the show. But how could we start it without saying hey to Twisted Dreams? Great to see you, brother. If you were here in the chat, that means...
Subject notes. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the read?
Oh, he says, Joe, I sent a link for a good topic sometime. I'm glad you told me that because I got an email. I didn't recognize the name, and there was a link attached to it. You know, and I'm always weary of email links.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always weary about that. You know, I was like, I don't want to click on it, but now that I know it's you, all right, I will check it out, and we'll see where we go from there. All right, let's get started. It's Thursday. I'm feeling good. Welcome to
Art and Stuff, your favorite podcaster's favorite show about comics and art and stuff. Over 25 years in the business on technicality, over 40 years consuming and collecting the comic book medium in many formats just to give myself some street cred.
Oh, shit.
Relentlessly charismatic editor extraordinaire, the Hispanic God on paper, smoother than your days and other ruse. Bear type 1, the only one, Jersey's finest, Sean Ahrent, with me as always, my brother and I.
Very talented, very sexy, very distinguished. Always narcissistic, but never vain. Staunch defender Rob Liefeld and Gina Carano, and a lover of all things 90s. Joseph Michael Sonntag, or Joe Sonntag, if you prefer. Is that my name? It is. Or as the Pope likes to call me, JMS. Rest in peace. And the chat likes to call me Ronan Joe. Welcome to the show, and as always, what an awesome show we have for you tonight, because who do we have with us?
We got returning with us Mr. Dan Chichester. Let's bring him on. Let's ask him the questions and see if we all agree. Probably won't, but it's always going to be a fun show. That's what it's all about.
I love it. Let's bring him on. Dan, what's going on, my friend? How you doing?
Salute you.
I'm so glad to see both of you again. Thank you for the opportunity to come back. I could just watch your soundboard or your video board all night. You know, with you're punching your things, what clips are going to come up next. It's like, you know, it's a best of roulette. So, you know, I'm all good. I'm good with that. But
you know, we've got a lot of people in the chat. They're here all the time. I'm trying to make more videos to just highlight some of these guys that are in here every single night that we stream, and I've got a lot. I haven't even showed off a lot that I have. It actually makes it harder because I've got all these to choose from. I got to search real quick. I'm like, all right, what am I doing? Where's it at? So I'm doing my best. You literally
need like a board, like a, you know, like the old days
radio
where they'd have like, you know,
you can
touch the pads and know what's going to come up.
What I need to do is get somebody that would work for free and just be a producer of the show, and behind the scenes they just handle it all. You know, like that's what we need. I don't know who would be sucker enough to do it for free, Sean, but we got to figure it out.
I don't know, but what I need in here is a margarita machine, because that would be phenomenal.
Oh shit,
that would be good too. Forget the video board, the margarita machine. It's Cinco de Mayo on Monday, right? So like
coming up, yes sir. Yeah,
you got.
I always miss it.
Yeah,
I always miss it. I always forget about it. I never celebrate it because I'm always working.
Because you're also Puerto Rican and I'm part Mexican, so that is not really our Day of Independence, but we do celebrate it on the white side of the fence. So.
Right there, you go. Yeah,
I'm there.
Yeah, I'm a quarter Puerto Rican. Is that what we say? I think. I don't know. It works.
Well,
you know,
I'll celebrate for both of you. You know, like
there you go. I love it. I love it.
There you go.
Twisted Dream said, I had the equipment. I definitely would do it. Oh, see? There you go.
Thank you.
You don't even need the equipment. We'll just bring you in. You stay backstage. I give you controls and you hit the buttons when you need to hit. See, it's that simple. It's that simple. It's really, you know, we'll talk about it. Let's go.
Very cool.
Well, Dan, we know you got a new book coming out, but we wanted to bring you on the show. And before we jump into that kind of stuff, a fun topic I thought we could have, since you were the writer of Daredevil Fall from Grace. We do know that Daredevil Born Again TV series just happened on Disney Plus, which some people like, some people don't like. I happen to like it, even though I have some issues with some of the clunkiness of the storytelling. The reshoots made some things kind of, it is what it is. I think next season is going to be much more focused on what they're doing.
Right.
But before we jumped in, excuse me, still getting over my whatever this is that I had. Before we jumped into the actual Daredevil Fall from Grace, I wanted to ask what you thought, being a writer for Daredevil, and obviously Black Armor just came out.
Yep.
Was it last year when that came out?
Yeah.
Year and a half ago. Yeah.
Year and a half.
Like,
Time
seems like
flies, man. It's
I know.
crazy.
It goes boom like that, but it's good.
Yeah. So, I mean, that just came out not too long ago, and that was awesome. I've been wanting to ask you what you thought of Daredevil coming back. Disney Plus, the Netflix series was such a great show. People universally loved that. And now we've got the Disney version, which I thought they did a pretty good job, but as one that has been in the world of Daredevil, what did you think about the series? And theory-wise, where do you think they're going to go? Because I feel like they might be pushing in a direction of a Fall from Grace storyline or a Shadowline storyline in season 2.
Well, you said the word before you brought me on, and it was a great word, which was clunky. And that's, there's some guys who are watching the show real time, and they invited me onto their podcast. Hey, do you want to review it as we're watching it, or like an hour after it comes out? And after I saw the first one, I was like, you don't want me as a guest. You really don't want me as a guest. I'm not going to do any good, mic time for you. It's a weird thing because I love the Netflix show as well. I think the Netflix show had super style. It did the senses so well. I love the priest. I love Uric. The priest was a really important element for me because he was a great foil to Matt. They timed it out well where he did the confessions, and it was exposition without being exposition. This one here, it's weird because everybody is so perfectly cast. They all really are. I mean, they're
great cast.
The characters. They put their all into it. I cannot fault that at all. And I kept watching the show wanting to love it. I wanted to be over the moon, and I just rarely got there. And I some of it you can, I guess blame on the reshoots. And I heard, some people say, oh, that episode was left over and this one's half the old stuff. But it just felt to me like very competent. Like it was well put together, but it didn't have that magic. And some of that to me, and this is just maybe being a storyteller, being a film nerd and and a film snob, as well, is there were just things that like the editing was like just this little bit off. The cuts were just like not right there. The scene would end and it would be, not on a great line. It would sort of like end, and what's going on? And it got really egregious, it's a big word, for me, like in the last episode where I don't even know what it means. I just,
just do it. It sounds good. Yeah.
It throws up $5 words every now and again. But at the end, he and spoiler alert, kids, but him and Karen go to the Red Hook, ports, or whatever. Like it's going to be some big battle, or he's going to rescue, Frank Castle, and they just they hang up by some rocks and they say, no, we shouldn't really do that, and then they go away. And it was like it just felt like, man, that's out of sync. Or the Punisher, and John Bernthal is so good. He really embodies the character and does so many great things with it. But at that last scene we see him, he walks into a melee fight. Not that he can handle a melee fight, but he just kind of walks in there. Where's the tactician? Where's the the military, strike guy? It just felt so off that he would do that. And then the senses drove me crazy because in the Netflix one they did such a great job. There was that early scene where it's with Rosario Dawson and the nurse, and he says, she's saying, well, what do you see? What do you feel? Like, how? And he said something like it's like the world's on fire.
Right.
And they did this kind of, like weird negative fiery effect to kind of
Right.
simulate
Yeah.
what he experiences. And I swear, if you did not know who Daredevil was, you would think his only power is super hearing, which they
True.
handled really well. I mean, they did it
Right.
really well, but they never touched on all the other sensory impressions, which you don't have to be, book specific. You don't have to be character, specific. But I think that's just a lost opportunity, like
Yeah.
open up his words. Thanks, Duck.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I wanted to, I wanted more of that. And I think it would just enrich the world, enrich the story. And so it's a weird thing. Like I watched it. There were a couple of moments that like, oh man, it's going to turn right now, and it just didn't. It just didn't take it to that next level.
Yeah.
And I keep comparing it to Reacher. I don't know if you guys have watched Reacher at all,
Yeah.
which is
I haven't. No.
a relatively predictable sort of show. You got this
Mhm.
Gotcha.
giant, literally giant sized
Yeah.
ex special forces, kind of guy, or ex military police, and he just, he's a force of nature, right, Sean? He's like,
Yes, he is.
it's if there's something wrong, he gets involved with it, he cleans it up. So that's what's going to happen. There's no real surprises. But I will say that show nails every beat, every
Mhm.
line, every moment, every setup pays off, and I just felt like Daredevil wasn't syncing together for me, and which didn't stop me from watching it, but I didn't. I
Right.
watch an episode and then I'd like, should we watch another one? Nah, no, watch it a couple days later, which is, that said a lot to me.
Yeah. No,
And
I completely get that, and I think everything you said is spot on. Like, I still enjoyed the show because, like I said,
oh
I'm
yeah,
pretty easily entertained, but the things I noticed were so so the whole Catholic aspect of the show, they kinda took out, and they showed
hmm
one scene in the first show or the first, episode where he kinda sees the church,
hmm
and then he kind of walks by it and walks past it,
right,
and I think maybe they had something at the end of the season where they brought something up that would, kind of reference the Catholic aspect, but that's such a big thing with the Daredevil character that if they
hmm
were doing it to a point where they were showing that, he was so affected by Foggy's death that he was, just completely lost, including his faith, that made sense to me. But I do hope that they kind of bring that dynamic back at some point because that's a Daredevil character. And
yeah,
there was
totally,
other things with the Punisher that I thought they really strove for the violence, which they nailed. Did a
sure,
good job with the violence and the blood. But yeah, they kind of pulled back a little bit. Maybe it seemed like he was just kind of headstrong. I'm just going to go into anything and I'm going to, bust a bunch of people up and whatever happens. Like the scene where the end of the scene where he gets captured or whatever. I
yeah,
thought they were going to set it up for like Daredevil coming in and have another team up fight, you
yeah,
know,
me
and
too,
then
right,
Daredevil just pieces out with Karen, and
right, right,
the Punisher is there getting, beat up or whatever. And I was just like,
hmm
that was a kind of weird end to the season. My biggest problem with the entire season, even though I liked it, was the fact that there's so many reshoots. You started off really good, in my opinion. Like the first two episodes, I thought were really good,
hmm
introducing the characters again. There was some good drama
hmm
there, and then they went into like 3 or 4 episodes that were just kind of all over the place, you
mm.
know.
Yeah,
And I was just like, this
yep,
yeah, I was like, this doesn't feel like it's not flowing good. Like I don't know what we're doing. Uh, and then you get to the end of the season, which set up, I think, for what could be a good season 2 if they're much more focused on what they want to do. And that's why I keep talking to people that were like, this was trash. We're not going to watch season 2. I'm just like, just remember everything we went through with season 1. And I'm not, apologizing for that. It is what it is. But season
sure,
2, I think, is much more focused on the story. And I'm looking forward to where they're going to go because we've seen that black suit and I don't know what they're planning on doing. But did you get a sense at all, like when you were watching the story unfold, of possibly where they might be going or where they might be borrowing from in season 2?
I I mean, my prediction, just based on what I'm watching, is that they're leaning very much in. I believe it was the Chip Zdarsky, storyline of. I think that was, he was the author of that one. Where it's just the vigilante,
Yeah.
force. The Kingpin's vigilante force, and Daredevil recruits a bunch of people, to bring it together, and they sort of set that up, to fight against it, and they bring that up at the end. But where they go in the bar, and he's like, we need an army or something like that, which
Yeah.
that's a perfect example for me of like not sticking the landing on the line. When you say,
Yeah, for sure. Right.
we need an army, and then you open the door, and it's an old bartender, a couple of cops we might have seen in the background of some scene, a couple other people who are just there for happy hour. Like, I'm not sure, I want it to, frankly, and this would be fan service. I want the door to open and have it be, Iron Fist and Cage, and
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and have the defenders, again, or something that
Yeah.
suggests
Yeah.
a bigger thing, or or he starts recruiting something just as a tease to pay off on that, because um it 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 just didn't feel like it had that oomph of a cliffhanger of like, oh my god, now I gotta see what's going to happen, next.
Yeah.
But I think that that is the inevitable thing. They're going to have to, the city will get worse, under
Hmm.
this pincer movement, under the kingpins, grab at everything, and everyone else is obviously being compromised, or brought under his sway, and so under the guise of, well, we've got a law and order city. Clearly, you don't, and so it's going to be up to these guys to kind of set things, right. I would think that that seems very much where they're going to go, which is a decent storyline to do, but I don't know
Right.
why you call the thing Born Again.
Right.
When you
Oh,
call
yeah.
the thing named after, and again, I'm not about being a slave to comic, uh, continuity, but
Right.
that is pretty much the most famous Daredevil storyline,
Yeah.
and you're going to call it that. Why don't you just do that damn story? Like, how do you
Yeah.
go
Right.
down the
Yep.
road and spend so much money on those episodes and know that the show wasn't working? Like, how do you do that? How do you write those scripts? How do you shoot that stuff and go so far down the road? I mean, Hollywood has got to be seriously effed up
Plus,
to
oh yeah,
to
that's
go.
probably another story altogether. I mean,
Yeah,
when you look at it, when you think about it, what would the show have been if they didn't do all those reshoots and retool it? Because when
yeah,
A
all the
yuck yuck
rumors,
fest
I was just
was
going
a
to say
comedy. Yeah.
it probably would have been really, really bad. They weren't going to have any kind of continuity with the Netflix series.
right,
Foggy and
right,
Page weren't even going to be involved. There was like all the stuff
right.
I think originally that was not going to happen, which I'm glad they went back and retconned the
Sure.
reshoots so that we got what we got, even though it wasn't as good. But yeah, the end scene, I was disappointed with the end scene, and I saw the director. He had an interview with somebody, and he said that they wanted
Mhm.
to leave it on like a um, which is it's kind of contradictory, kind of how you explain this, Dan, how they set it up, but how they executed it was like he wanted to leave it on that there was like no hope, right? That the Kingpin had won and there was going to be a hell of a fight to come back, and that's why they
Mhm.
didn't have any big names in the bar. But when you have this big speech by Karen and she talks him out of going
Yeah,
into this fight where he's probably going to die, and he's like,
right,
let's get an army. And you kind of think that he has a plan, and it kind of
right.
contradicts it to be like, well, then let's have this scene where it shows that there's really no hope or it's going to be a really big fight because all you have is this, like
Yeah.
yeah. So those were the things, right? Though
And
definitely
then you
some,
get like the South House and like Shuffleboard Championship League. You're like, oh, we're fucked. Yeah.
yeah. You got like
I
the
mean,
B and D squad of the police officers there, and you got the bartender. You're like, what's she gonna
exactly.
do?
Yeah,
I
you
don't
got the
know.
one guy who's like retired. He's not even like a cop anymore, for real. You got
Yeah,
like a couple of them who are like, "Oh, I walked into the wrong bar." I mean,
yeah,
I could buy the like ending on like no hope, like it's all gone, because that's the critical turn in Born Again.
Sure.
right.
Again, he's his life has been destroyed. He's literally been beaten within an inch of his life. He's been thrown in the back of a cab. The cab gets thrown into the river with the dead cabbie, and he's going down, and then that ends on that moment, where he breaks out of the cab, right, and you see him reaching for the surface, and I think that's the issue, where that great line that Miller wrote, which was all about, it leads into took everything away from me. I've got nothing left to hope for, but a man without
Yeah,
hope is a man without fear. And
Hmm.
I still get chills like thinking about
Right.
that just
yeah,
as a
yeah,
reader. And if you want to do that kind of cliffhanger, ruin
yeah.
him, ruin him
Right,
like
right.
that, like ruin him so much. And then at the last second, have him reach up or reach out, or somebody extends a hand to him, whatever it is. Doesn't have to be the river scene or whatever, but then that would be the hook for the audience to go like, oh my God, what's going to happen
Yeah.
now? But now it's in this kind of halfway space. Like the Kingpin's
Yeah.
obviously intimidating as fuck.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, Soprano Jr. is gonna burn in a scene in the second season, literally, because they had that whole line of like, "I'll burn for you, Mr. Fisk," and
That's a good point.
he's gonna be
Foreshadowing
set on
possibly with
fire.
that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's the beats. Like I just want,
Yeah.
when you watch so many shows and there's so much good television on these days, and so many I think nail that in a great way. And this just didn't. I can't say
Yeah.
oh, don't watch it, but on the other hand, like I wasn't leaning into it to jump at it, which is disappointing in that way.
Yeah. I think overall, a lot of people were probably disappointed with it. Like I said, I enjoyed because they did do some pretty good things in it, but it wasn't
Oh, yeah.
consistent,
Mhm.
right?
Totally.
And it was like they gave you enough to kind of hold you on, and then you start to kind of dip, and then they do something cool, and you'd be like, "Oh yeah, dude, that was awesome."
Yeah.
Then they dip back down. It's kind of like this roller
Right,
coaster
right,
ride of it didn't keep
right.
you up here the entire time.
Mhm.
It's interesting because again, I'm not as averse in the Daredevil lore as some people are,
Yep.
and I was just reading, going into the next season with the black costume. People are theorizing it could be the Shadowline storyline that they're going into, where people are talking about possibly him recruiting the Hand and bringing all this stuff in as well. And then it
Could be.
dawned on me, I was just like, what? Wonder if they borrow from a couple different storylines, and if they go with the storyline where Matt is dead, we're assuming
Mhm.
his apartment blew up, and might be reported or used by the Kingpin to say whatever, that he's dead, whatever, this or that. That they could have
Right.
borrowed a little bit from the fall from Gray's storyline, which is what I want to segue into
Mhm.
talking about. When you were doing this fall from grace, when you were getting ready for that, and you were taking the story to that, what were you thinking, thought process wise, when you were telling the story, when you're coming up with it? Like, how did you come up with it, and did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish with it?
Yeah, because what we really wanted to accomplish with it was to get a spotlight on Daredevil, our Daredevil, specifically, because
Yeah.
in that day and age, if you weren't a spider or you weren't a mutant, you
Hmm.
weren't getting a lot of attention from the sales department, the PR department. We had probably told some stories that, in retrospect, maybe they weren't the strongest stories. The sales were down a little bit, not terribly, but we wanted to get them back up. And then
Right.
Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. were coming out with what would be the Man Without Fear miniseries of their own. And suddenly all the attention for anything Daredevil was all over there. Like the sales department was putting out ads that it was, it's Miller time, which I took him to task for. I said, great, steal a beer ad,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
and I said, and I wasn't even in marketing at that point, but I said, you are invalidating your character. Like this is not a disservice to good purchase, guys. Reaper
Yeah.
Destroyer.
Hell yeah. Thank you.
The no disservice to Frank Miller, who's obviously an epic talent. But you are saying the only time Daredevil is valid is when Frank Miller is on the book, if you are putting an
Mm,
ad out there.
true.
And
Right.
so we were under, we were the also rans, nobody was giving us any love. And so we, meaning me, Scott McDaniel, who's my art partner on this, Ralph Macchio, who's the editor, Pat Garrett, who was the
Yeah.
assistant editor, we sort of formed this little shadow organization and said, how do we get attention? And so we said we got to do a big story. We gotta throw everything possible at it. And we did. We said we're going to upend his life. We're going to do the costume gimmick. We're going to have 1,000 guest stars. We're going to try to get some variant covers. It was like, what can't we do? I don't think there's
Right.
anything we didn't do to try to like do this. So it's a completely shameless act of sales manipulation to try to pull the spotlight back. One guy did this review, which I dearly love. Years after the fact, it wasn't at the time, and he said, these guys were under the unfortunate circumstance where everyone's paying attention to everything but them, And while this story
Mm.
is like crazy bug fuck in a lot of ways, you got to give them credit for like just putting everything into it, like trying everything to seize that spotlight back. I mean, we even paid for our own publicity. Like me and Scott put
Oh
money
wow,
into
really?
a PR guy to get us like some articles in Wizard magazine, which was
Oh
the
geez.
big forum of the day, and and uh, and it did. To get back to answering your specific question, we did get attention. All of a sudden Daredevil was a big deal again, and this Daredevil was like in the spotlight. And it was leading toward like many more Daredevil projects, to come,
Yeah.
which would get sort of, trounced when the book got taken away from Ralph and I got pushed off the
Mm.
book. But so I think it did accomplish what it set out to do. But as we'll get into it, it's there's some really great things about it, I think, and there's some messy moments. I'm adult enough to admit my messiness.
Yeah, no, that's what I love about you too. Like, I mean, you really are. Um, and more people should be like that,
Yeah.
What was the idea behind the switching up of the costume? Like, I know in the 90s we went through this period where so many characters were getting new costumes, upgrades
Sure.
across Marvel, across DC. It was just a fad that was happening. Was that something
Right.
that they came to you and said, like, hey, we want to have him be in a new costume, or was it an idea you were just like, with this story, this is gonna fit, and I think this would be cool?
Yeah, I know. Again, it was if we had a big whiteboard, if we had like a big planning board in Ralph's office, which we should have had,
Nice. Yeah.
and we could have listed across the top like every gimmick we could possibly think of. Like I said, guest star, this, that, the
Right.
other thing. As you said, costumes were kind of a gimmick. You swap up a costume, you get some extra attention. And so we said, well, Daredevil has not changed his costume in umpteen years, right? The last time was the
True.
gold
Yeah.
and red one.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
this would be something to do. And so we said that has to be part of the story. Now, once we decided to do it, we didn't want it just to be a total gimmick. So
Right.
that led to parts of the story, being so roughhouse, being so he gets pounded in the early couple of issues of this by some heavy hitters, and he literally gets, his costume gets shredded. He's getting burned. He's getting beaten. He sees, this train coming at him from what seems to be other things headed to the city to go after the gimmick of the story,
Right.
and he says, "I'm no good to anybody if I'm like that." Right? I'm no good if what we're seeing on the screen right now, if I'm torn to
Yeah.
shreds. So I've got to admit that I need a little protection, and which is something they did early in the Netflix show. When he finally gets his costume, it's kind of
True. Right. Yep.
Hmm.
it's a more it's not an armored costume, but it is more reinforced. But so we worked that into the storyline. We worked that into the material that the costume would be made of. And I did my BS scientific research and said it's made of this, and then Scott did like 10 or and I did. It's actually like it's this stuff called biomimetic materials, which are
Right.
lightweight materials that are based on natural fabrics or natural structures. And Scott did about 10 or so designs. Some of them were just crazy, not right. um, some of them, were sexier than others, and
Yeah.
then we all kind of, gave him input on it, and ended up narrowing in on what would become known as the Black Armor nowadays. But that's what became his new costume. And I remember there was this great moment before the book came out or the storyline really started. I was at a Marvel run convention down, I think it was in Texas, and Stan Lee was there. And Stan was like, and I've met Stan a couple times, but I, saying hi to him. And he says, and I'm going to do my bad Stan Lee impersonation. He says, so Dan, I hear you're changing Daredevil's costume. And I was like, oh yes, Stan. And I started to go into all the reasons why, and all that sexy stuff about my scientific research. And he just looks at me and he's going, well, I hope you know what you're doing. Which was either a vote of faith
Nice.
or like you guys are so screwed.
Right, yeah.
And you could
That's
read it
funny.
either way.
That was
And
actually pretty good impersonation though. That wasn't
Yeah.
bad. That was good.
but
I got to
you know,
compliment Scott's storytelling on this. Like he really amped it up. Like because he had
yeah,
only been on the book about like a year, maybe a little bit longer, if that. He
yeah.
stylistically he changed and like his storytelling just beautiful stuff.
Overnight he changed. I mean, he decided to do this. He'd been wanting to. I mean, I love Scott dearly. I loved working with him. I think he's a
Mhm.
phenomenal storyteller. I always felt like we synced,
Yeah,
really well. And I never worried about, oh, what's this guy going to do?
gesture.
But there was a certain
Nice.
aspect of his early work that was, uh, he's still finding his way, right? This is a
Mhm.
guy
Mhm.
who was a trained as an engineer, was an engineer,
Oh,
decided to
okay.
give up that career to be, always wanted to be a comic artist. So he gave up, his engineering career to become this. And some of his early stuff, I always thought was very Mark Bagley light almost. It's
Right.
got like sort of that feeling.
I
And
got you.
but
Yeah.
then this turn, knowing this was going to be this big radical story, he just decided to start experimenting with all the stuff that he was feeling passionate about, and I think really redefined, his style, and took the book in a great way. There were a lot of people who didn't like it. Frank Miller, I don't think liked it at all.
Mm,
He felt like he was kind of. I had heard, that he had, thought it was kind of like ripping off some of his influences from like Sin City and such. And Frank was not happy, I know, about the Elektra
oh,
resurrection. So
I was
spoiler
actually gonna
alert.
ask you about that. I was gonna ask you about that because I had heard rumors that he was possibly upset that you brought Elektra back, and that I could see that the whole Sin City. But here's the thing about Frank, from what I've read and I've heard about it. He
Mhm.
didn't seem like he liked that. Look, Sin City was very influential, right? Like it really
Yeah,
was.
totally.
Like it's just
It was
you
like
got to
right, it's like Reservoir Dogs or like Pulp
yeah,
Fiction, right?
Yeah.
and you
Mhm.
you got to expect that when you do something like that, there's going to be people that want to kind of test that out, because
Yeah,
you know especially artists are going to be like, oh, that's really awesome. I want to try to bring that into my art. I want to try to do,
totally.
Jim Lee did the Death Blow thing, and I know Frank Miller was not really excited about that, and kind of
Mhm.
threw shade that way. So that could have just been like, a professional jealousy when it's just you seeing other people kind of playing with that style that you kind of
Yeah,
made
yeah,
famous. And I guess I can get that, but to a point where I'm just like, yeah, that has happened since the dawn of time. Comic artists are going to see things the other artists do, and they're going to adopt stuff, and that's just what it is.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean that's creative art. I mean that's you see that in every possible medium. Film. I love this cover. I love this. It glows in the dark. If you ever have a
Oh,
chance to
did it?
see
I
it,
didn't. I know.
Yep.
right?
Nice,
So
nice.
it would reverse out, and the demon, the Hellspawn character, would vanish, which was part of the
Oh,
story
okay.
because Daredevil couldn't sense, Hellspawn. So it worked out really great. I think it's
That's
probably
cool.
radioactive and probably killed a lot of people. But um, but that's art. I mean, like I said, like how many filmmakers were influenced by Pulp Fiction, and
Right.
and
Oh,
how many
for sure. Right.
bad
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction ripoffs were there, and
Yep.
not that again Scott was ripping off anything, but I know Scott was influenced by that, and I love the fact he threw himself into this and said,
Yeah.
"This is a big storyline. This is a literally an upending of the Matt Murdock's world storyline. What better time to take a swing?"
Right.
And that was, I know what was driving him. And for me, to suddenly see such a relatively radical departure from, 318 to 319, which was the quote unquote prologue to this story,
Mhm.
was just, mind boggling because I was working the same way on this as I was, with Netho on Black Armor. So
Yeah.
this was a plot. The plot, is written in chunks of pages. Scott, executes, his version of what's going to happen there, and then I come back in and script it. And there were many times, when I would see what he had done that would take me in a different direction.
Yeah.
That was just inspired by what he did. Sometimes I did him justice. Sometimes I wrote too fucking much. But I like to think I did a little bit more of the former, but there's definitely parts of life. I love this
Yeah.
page. I love this. That's
This is
such a great.
Okay, see, now we're getting into when they or when you guys did the costume change. I remember seeing that as a kid, and I liked Daredevil when I was younger, but again, he didn't rise up to the level of like you said, Spider-Man, X-Men. There are other
Mhm.
heroes that I liked better when I was younger. And then the black costume came around, and I just
Right.
thought it was one of the coolest things I had seen. And this is still probably one of my favorite costume designs on Daredevil of all time.
Mhm.
And I know I say that to some people, and they're like, "Yo, classic costume," but whatever. It's just a personal opinion. But I just
Mhm.
for the '90s and for the young kid that I was at the time, early teens
Yep.
when this came out, I saw this and I was like, "Man, that is so cool!" Like the design elements
Mhm.
of this just grab you. Yeah, it's black, but like the gray, the red, the
Yep.
armor.
Such
All
a
of it.
beautiful gesture. Did you guys
Yeah.
do something intentionally with the colors to not look quote unquote flat? Because if you look at the background, it looks almost painterly or
Oh
Mhm.
yeah.
like
Pat
it.
Garrity, who's playing the colorist on this one, was thinking very much along those lines. Like
Beautiful
trying to do some
stuff.
stuff. And this is interesting. And one of the the sins of the costume, the sins of the design,
Yeah,
was that for a long time the only person who could draw it was Scott.
nice, nice.
Look at what he does there. Like he fit the costume, even though it was reinforced and all this other stuff, so beautifully to the lines of the body that it
Mhm.
allowed,
Mhm.
in my mind, and I think the reader's mind, to be still as flexible and as acrobatic and everything else as Daredevil should ever be. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, when it would fall into other people's hands while it was still around, a lot of people just looked at it. They saw the metal, or reinforced, plates, and they said, "Oh, it's armor," and they would bulk Daredevil
oh,
up
yeah,
so much that
Mhm.
he looked like a reinforced clown. And it
yeah.
really, and that's where I think the tendency to call it armor, and that's why for like the better part of 20 years, people would interview me and they'd say, something about well, what about that armor? And I would say I never called it armor. And I never
Right.
did until the sales department, at Marvel said, we're going to call the miniseries Black Armor. And I was like, you bet, boys. Whatever it
You're
takes
like,
for you to sell
"Yes."
this book, I'm like, I'm all on. It's Black Armor
Yeah,
from here on out.
there you go.
But he does, but Scott really does, and Netho did this as well.
Yeah,
He just fits it to the body, and it makes you feel like it doesn't matter. It is not a restriction. It is an extension of the way he
yeah.
moves and everything else, which is really what makes it work so nicely.
Um, yeah, no, I agree. I again, I just seeing it just brings back a lot of memories of the time that it popped up. And just like anything, like the costume didn't stick around long enough, and when they do bring it
Mhm.
back, it's nice. That's why I was so excited when Black Armor came out because I was like, "Oh shit," like they haven't done that in a while, or at least I hadn't seen it, because I
Oh,
miss
30
all
years
the
they didn't
shadow
do
line and
it.
stuff, like the other kind of
Right.
style of black costumes. But this black costume was my favorite. Um, when you got to play with some of these characters, we just saw Venom in there and everything. Like I
Mhm.
said, you're trying to make this big story, all these guest appearance. What was it about the character of Venom that was in your mind to bring into the storyline?
Again, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, and as I've always been, I mean, it's like Venom sells, we wanna sell the book. Like,
There
I
you
was
go.
going
I like
Okay.
it.
after
Good
I
enough.
was going after one of 2 things, either cool characters that we knew we could do what we wanted with, like Silver
Yeah.
Sable was quote, unquote, "owned" by my good friend Greg Wright, who was
Okay.
writing the book, and so, I thought there was a lot of potential with her. She was sexy, she had a team of
Yeah.
mercenaries around her, she'd be a good-looking, character. Her book was doing okay, not like rocket sales, but okay. Um, and I knew that, we'd get free license to do whatever we wanted. Or we went after the Venoms because, that's gonna draw like the spotlight
Yeah.
in the book. Venom was everywhere at that point in time. Venom was outstripping everything. The Punisher,
Yeah.
Ghost
Yeah.
Rider. You know, he was the big dark, lethal Avengers, magnet. And so we said, put him in the
Mhm.
book somewhere, give him, a moment in time, and we can, roll with that and take advantage of it and keep the momentum, hopefully going. So that was the impetus for all the guest stars. It was one of two things. Like, Morbius wasn't the biggest seller again, but I knew I could get away with stuff and it would be a fun, bit of business. The Hellspawn character was well known from some of the, work that Todd McFarlane, had done, in some of the Spider-Man stuff, I think, or one of the Inferno crossovers. So
Okay, yeah.
everything was somewhat tactical. And we at the beginning with Ralph and Pat, had kind of created a like a punch list of who can we get, who won't we get interfered with, because generally when you're working with characters outside of your office,
Yeah.
you have to get permission and
Right.
and pull them in. How do you use them and so forth? So we might have wanted to go after whoever. Maybe we wanted to go after Ghost Rider, which we did not. But if we did, we would have had to check with the Ghost Rider office and so forth. So
No, I got you.
fortunately, we got away with everybody we wanted. And then you just passed, Electro, which was the other,
Yep.
big ticket item for the storyline. So that was an interesting win.
What was that like when you came up when you approached him and said, "I want to bring Elektra back"? Because wasn't the whole issue with Frank that supposedly that Marvel promised that they were not going to bring that character back?
That was the rumor, and I never asked Ralph directly about it. But that was the quote unquote common knowledge forever and a day that because Frank had killed Elektra, that even though she was owned by the company, she worked for
Right.
hire,
Mm-hmm.
that she would stay dead. And obviously that would probably only last as long as Ralph was the editor. And when later the book was taken away from Ralph, all bets would have been off anyway. But the interesting thing to me about that was, earlier in the run, on my run on the book, I had brought up casually, "Hey, Ralph, do you think there's ever any possibility we might want to bring Elektra back into a story?" And I got shut down
Oh,
hard, really fast, and not mean. I mean, Ralph is a
right.
great guy, but it was just, that's not a door that's going to be open, and it's fine. It wasn't dependent on it, but
Yeah.
while we were making that non-whiteboard whiteboard, when we were sitting in that office
Yeah.
and scheming, amongst ourselves, like, what do we want to throw in this story? Let's throw this, let's throw that, let's put this, let's find a way to make this work. It's Ralph who, out of nowhere, just
Oh,
said, "Well, what would you guys think about adding Elektra to the story?" And I'm 99% certain Scott was in the office at that meeting,
okay.
because in my mind's eye, I remember looking over at him and this telepathic, did he just say what we think he said? And instead of asking the obvious question, which would have been, "Well, Ralph, I thought you shut us down on this," or "I thought she
Right.
was off limits," or any kind of conversation like that, I remember just saying, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can figure out something." just to make sure nothing, I don't want him to come to his senses. I don't want him to
Right.
rethink
Right.
this.
Yeah.
I just want to grab this ball and run with it. I don't care about it's going to piss off Frank Miller. It's going to
Right.
upset some fans. I saw this as a brass ring to grab onto and hinge a lot of the story on, because, and I like having reasons for the story. And when
Right.
you look at it from my perspective, I mean, the title "Fall from Grace" probably applies more to Elektra
Mm.
ultimately than it does Matt. Matt's life gets ruined and screwed up, and he has to invent this, pseudo identity to cover up his death and so forth. But it's Elektra who, in the story, is, when we first meet her, she's, she has cleansed herself of her past sins. She is hanging out with the chaste, Styx group. I'm pretty sure I named them.
Yeah.
So when they name drop them, on the show. I always like that.
Nice. Get some royalties is what you need.
Oh yeah, big money,
Yeah,
man.
get
Big
that.
Yeah.
um, but you know, she's hanging out there. She's cleansed herself. She's refined herself. She chooses to come back down off the literal mountain, knowing that things are in motion that she's partly responsible for, and that she can't let run out of control, and that Matt is going to be in trouble, and so forth. So by doing that, and what she ultimately has to do to confront that evil that is a part of her, um, she essentially then loses the license, to go back up to that mountain. She is no longer pure.
Mm,
So
gotcha.
really,
Yeah.
she has fallen from grace in the most literal sense. And so, uh, and this was fun too, like taking elements of the fantastic Electra Assassin series I'd worked on as an assistant editor, and kind of incorporating those into a story, which was probably also bad form, like stealing from Frank Miller stories that
Mm.
but they're pieces of the mythology, they're pieces of the world. So
I was just gonna
Right.
say, yeah, like I feel like when you work for Marvel and you bring in storylines and stuff, I mean, like you introduce that stuff, it belongs to Marvel, it belongs to the mythos. There's
right.
that anime boobs there. Okay, you
I
got
know. I
really
was
good.
about to say you could just let's. I don't remember that part of the story, but
But no,
who
you
knows?
bring that stuff, and Marvel owns it. Like that was the whole
Yeah,
thing back in the day, and like why the Image guys left and everything like that, reasons
yeah,
why. But like that's just it. You make a popular character, they're gonna bring him back at sometimes. Like there's gonna be a story element that's gonna come back. And as
right.
fans, we probably had no problem with that because we don't know the inner workings and all that kind of stuff. We're just reading the stories, and it's like, oh, cool, this character's back. But I was wondering, like, what was
Mhm.
the fan reaction at that point when Elektra came back? Do you remember if it was like, was it positive? Was there backlash? Do you remember specifically?
I remember hearing through back channels again, like never a direct kind of confrontation,
Yeah.
but back channels that Frank Miller was not happy at all, like really
Mm,
like angry, unhappy with the decision overall at Marvel, at Ralph, maybe at me. I don't know, but that's what I heard. But fan wise, I never heard any grief. I mean, I
yeah.
just heard that the people were digging the story. Some didn't, but the people who were digging the story, they were just all into what was going on with it. And so that was for me a win. We were doing something. It was a little bit of a surprise. That she's in the story, that she shows up, and so to me it ended up working out really well. I mean, I've been on panels more recently where sometimes that comes up, or somebody says something like well whatever idiot at Marvel decided to bring back Elektra, and I'm like, well, yeah, that would be
You're like,
me,
that's me.
raising my
Ah,
hand. That's me. I'm that idiot.
checked.
Yeah, check. Not even, because I own it. I think I know Scott and I put everything we had in our bag of tricks and
Yeah.
in our hearts into the story. And again, some of it does not work. Um, but we you can't say it was for lack of trying. And one of the things that I know does work is that we honored that character. We took her very seriously.
Mhm.
We took her
Mhm.
seriously here. We did a follow-up mini series, that was supposed to be the, beginning of many Elektra stories, which did not happen, but we 110%, committed ourselves to treating her, with respect and elevating her in the way that she had been represented before.
Right.
And so I stand by that, and but some people, if they don't like it, they
Yeah.
haven't come back and torn me down more recently, but maybe after this show they will. Oh, you're the guy.
They're like, oh, yeah, now we know. No,
Now we
it's
know.
we when we were streaming on Tuesday, we were looking at the new Batman 159, the new Hush series,
Uh-huh.
and the subject of death came up, and David Williams was in the chat, really good artist, and he was just like, no death is permanent in comics, and that's just what it is. Like
Right.
I don't know a single character, and maybe there are some out there that have died, like significant characters that have died and not come back at some point, because that's just what you do. Because a writer gets an idea, a company gets an idea, let's bring this character back, let's make it a big thing. And I think fans just we're used to it now, and it's just I think a death can still be impactful. I don't think that robbed the Frank Miller death of
No.
Elektra at all. I think that still stands on its own as this great moment in comic book history. But it still gives the fans something exciting when a character does come back. So I got no problem with it personally. I think it works. Or
Totally.
worked.
I mean, I think that's the exact it. It's a big sandbox. Some people are going to want to grab onto certain things. Some people are going to grab on and do a great job with it. Some people are going to grab on and do a crappy job of it.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
The use of shadows and negative space. Yeah, Scott did amazing work here.
Yeah, the art in this is great.
Perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. That spread you just went past, Sean, if you're doing the scrolling, that I love that double body spread, where they're like on the operating tables and stuff.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just, like,
yeah.
great, crazy stuff.
Yeah. Let me give a shout out to a couple people that jumped in the chat. We got Wiley J. Draws came in. He said even Bucky came back. That is true.
Exactly.
Pizza's in the house. We also saw
pizza.
Edwin jumped in here. Mike McMahon, Hojo, Sheldon Martin's here as well. Bionic Bro jumped in while we were all talking. If I missed you guys, SF Gaming's here as well. So just want to appreciate everyone that's in the chat watching with us. Anywhere, everybody that's watching on X as well. Wherever you guys are at, please hit the like button, share it, let people know we're live. Come over to the YouTube channel, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and join in on the conversation. We were talking to Dan Chichester about Daredevil Fall from Grace, who Dan is the one that wrote the book. So this is a real fun insight into this book as well. Sean is currently scrolling through the art here as we are having this conversation.
And I'm just fucking getting lost in the storytelling, but listening to it like it's like book on tape with Dan in my ear. So I'm having a beautiful time right now. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I tried in my overwriting style, which erupted way too much, to not cover up Scott's art. So I don't know if he was leaving me open spaces because he's going to fuck it up and spill it with words. But I think he's just doing a great job with that use of framing and as wild as he gets. And this is, I think, sometimes a problem with comics. He gets crazy with some of the panel layouts, but the storytelling, I feel, is always spot on. You can track what's going on, really, really well.
You're not overwriting. There's writers that like to let you know that they're writers and they overwrite, but with this story, it all works with the beats, and your scripting and dialogue is phenomenal. So both of you guys just made one hell of an awesome story.
Well,
it's very memorable.
You're making me feel good, man. Thank you. But look, but again, I'm gonna own this shit. I'm so fucking in love with the M dash. Fucking finish a sentence. Finish a sentence and pick it up in the next caption. Everything doesn't have to string together. I'm right. I look at this and the words are pretty good, but that creates distraction for the readers. But you learn over time. I almost slipped into that with Black Armor, and I was like, you got to stop this. You got to walk away from the computer. Go away.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Black Armor dialogue and everything, but I will say, looking back at a 12 to 13-year-old Joe Sonntag, looking at all the words, I probably would have been like, it's too much for me. I'm just gonna look at the art.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's when you said we were going to talk about this. My first reaction, man, Joe is going to rake me over the coals for all the words.
I've got much more appreciative of storytelling since I started getting into storytelling than I had in the past. So I can appreciate going back now and reading more words than I would have done when I was younger.
Right.
Well, trust me. I used to, be a huge, or I'm still a huge fan of Spawn. But when Spawn first came out, Todd McFarlane was one of the wordiest writers ever. You'd read a Spawn book and he'd have a splash page and he'd have 5 paragraphs of dialogue that you had to read, and I wasn't doing that.
True. Yeah. I wasn't doing that at all. I compared to him, I'm I'm a matchbook cover, writing like 3 words.
Yeah.
But go back one thing, Sean. There's one thing I want to point out, and then this page, I'll say something about. Look at the arrows there. I love. You were talking about the senses before with Born Again. A little
Mhm.
further down, the black and white thing of the arrows. If you go
Go
down
down a
like
little bit, Sean.
little Sean.
Down, not up.
Oh, see, I'm
right there,
dyslexic.
you
right
go, right
there.
there.
No, there you go. But like,
There we go.
Scott came up with that whole approach to sort of like that scritchy, radar effect. And
Nice.
I think that is so cool of how, you get the impression of what he's sensing / seeing. And
Yeah.
that's a very unique, way to sort of bring the senses and that radar sense to life. And I just think he just it's a great job playing that out throughout this story. And
Yeah, I was wondering,
I do like that, yeah.
were they inverted or did he go in and do the reverse syncing with this?
I believe it was the reverse inking. I think
Okay.
he's working with Hector Collazo, who unfortunately passed away way too young a number of years ago. But I'm pretty sure that, and he and the two of them were working pretty closely. So I think it was the ability to indicate that, and then
Okay.
knowing that Hector was going to run with it. But then that's followed like masterclass storytelling. Indeed, like this spread. I remember in the plot, and I don't have the plots anymore, because they got ruined
That's
in
so
a
cool.
hard drive crash. But
Oh, geez.
I remember writing this and describing this, and in my mind's eye again, I probably had all this bullshit like captions and stuff I was going to put all over this. And the minute I saw this, and then Scott said he wanted to run it in black and white, I was like, well, and frig this. That's like everything in my mind just became that one word balloon. And
Yeah. That's
because
so
what else
awesome.
isn't it? Like, look at that. That's like out
Beautiful.
of this world. It's just
Yeah,
the
it's
more you
such a
look
good
at
spread.
it, yeah.
It looks
comes
like he's
to life.
whooping their ass, but still he has that sense of a dancer ballerina.
Yes,
Like
yes,
it's
yes.
phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yeah, the fluidity. He's like
Yeah.
knocking for them, all over the place. The multiple arrows going to the other guy. It's just,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's just the more you look at it, the more there is to enjoy.
Yeah, some beautiful work. How many issues did you do of this? And did you finish out the story that you were trying to tell with this whole story, or did they come in and start messing around with stuff? Because I know you said they took you off the book eventually, or forced you out.
Yeah, that would be like a year later or so, a little over a year
Okay.
after this. So we finished this off to where we wanted. This ran between 319, which was for some reason we called 319 a prologue because there was a lot of
saw, yeah.
setup, but
Mhm.
but 319 is the start of the story. And then we saw 325 as like a kind of an artificial numbering system. Like, 300 was a big deal, 325 feels kind of like a milestone.
Right.
So we were aiming to have the conclusion in 325, which we did. And if you ever do find a copy of 325, there's an amazing, and I had even forgotten about it until a couple years earlier. There's an amazing poster stapled into that issue. It's like a double-sized issue, and there's like a 16 by 24
Oh, wow.
poster of Scott did that's like almost like a movie poster, the whole like Fall from Grace story, all the characters, Elektra and Daredevil. So it's a really wild piece if you ever get a
Oh,
chance to see
nice.
it.
I might have to try to find that. Go to eBay. We'll get
Exactly.
it.
Now this is another dope ass shot. This is just comic
Yeah,
books. This is what it's all about, man.
Yeah, look at the sense of scale there. He just does such
Yeah.
a great job, and he's really playing with so many things. Just scale, dynamics, the perspective. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really great. And
Yeah,
then
it's a
again,
good
there you
treat.
can't possibly, you can't take a page like that and add like a bunch of other crap, right? You got to end it on like a
Right.
strong line or a strong whatever, cliffhanger.
Yeah, I need to take that advice going forward when the splash pages. Wiley J. Dross says, when you left DD, so did I, just so you know. There you go, man.
Oh man, thank you,
Go.
man. Thank you. I didn't have any choice, but I appreciate the.
Joe, I'm about to get to one of those
Did
cartoon
you think?
bloops. So if you want to take me off real quick, and I'll get to the next issue.
How many issues you got to go? Because I want to start.
Two more.
All right, let's go through those quickly.
All right. I'm having a good time. No, I'm kidding.
No, I'm having a great
I'm
time.
like,
But yeah, let's get through those. Oh, sorry. You're not past the boobs yet.
My bad. No, stop. All right, let's go.
So I think if you got it, I think if you took the tour for yourself, Joe, I think as you've seen, like from Scott's artwork and storytelling,
yeah,
you'd groove on most of it, and I think you'd pick up on the general things. I think you probably rightly disengage from some of the places where I was, not quite as in control of my so-called skills as I would like to have been.
You're selling yourself too short. It was a hell of a read from the 12-year-old to the 43-year-old I am now.
Thank you,
44,
man. Thank
43? You. I don't know.
I was going to say,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I went back and I started to read this a little bit right before we got the show going, but I've been crazy busy, so I didn't get too far in it. But what I was reading, I liked. And like I said, I'm on this journey of trying to read more comic books than I have in the past and really get more into the stories now that I am doing my own my own writing and stuff. So I did like where it was going. And I read all of Black Armor, that
Black
was
Armor. I would scold you if you didn't read Black Armor, because
Black
Armor's got the good balance.
And that was great. Yeah, Black Armor was great. Yeah.
Joe introduced me to that. He's like, you got to get this. I'm like, what? Because I don't really pick up modern day books unless like somebody really tells me about it. I went to the shop, I got it. I was like, God dang, this is awesome. I was on that ride with you. It was beautiful.
Yep.
We had fun. Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny thing about this, and I keep wanting to run into him at a convention and tell him in person, like Tom DeFalco was the editor in chief at the time, and I was a little intimidated by Tom, for whatever reason. And
I'm thinking of Brevoort. I apologize.
No, not Brevoort. Yeah, the Tom DeFalco, and we, Tom, when Tom heard we were doing this big story. I don't know if I've told this story actually out loud before, but I will now.
All right, let's go. Story time.
When he heard we're doing this big story, he wanted, you got to pitch it to me. I got to make sure it's going to the right place. And so Ralph arranges this lunch. We all go out. It's me, Pat, Scott, Tom DeFalco, a couple other people. And I'm hoping it's just going to be a Marvel lunch. We're going to bullshit. We're going to have a good time. We'll never get to the topic at hand, right? And then
nice.
And it's pretty much going that way. We're like 45 minutes in the lunch. We're probably going to take off in a few minutes. And Ralph, God, want to slap him, says, Dan, Tom wanted to know about the story.
Oh, jeez.
Shit. So
almost
I pitched the story. I almost made it. And so I pitched the story. And the story is, convoluted, in a way. In the 60s, the CIA or some organization was working on a crazy virus that could, mutate people's minds, allow them to become almost like telekinetic manifestors. They could think something, it would become real. And they were testing this out in the New York subways. And then it got lost in the subway, right? And nobody knows what happened to it, right? And then this becomes the MacGuffin, for the storyline. It's discovered years later, and everybody wants a piece of it. Venom wants a piece of it to get stronger. Morbius wants a piece of it to cure himself. Hellspawn wants a piece of it to, do something else. Everybody wants it for their own reasons. But so I pitched this whole thing to Tom, and he looks at me, and this will be my Tom DeFalco impersonation, and he it's too complicated. Just hide it in a warehouse, which sounds a lot like my Stan Lee impersonation. And I was so incensed. I was I thought up this whole elaborate scheme, and how dare you? And I didn't say this to him, but I'm seething, right? And we get back to the office, and Ralph is like, well, you heard the chief, what are we going to do about it? And I was full of piss and vinegar, and I remember just saying, well, before we went to lunch, all of us sitting here thought this was a decent story, right? Everybody was like, yes. And I said, so why isn't it still a decent story? And nobody objected to it. So I just went ahead and wrote the story just as I wanted to.
Nice.
But in retrospect, I agree with Tom.
You're like, looking back, he was right, damn
Looking
it.
back, he was right, damn it. And we could have told the same story and, kind of decomplicated, certain aspects of it in a good way. So his
Mhm.
instincts were 10% right. But I was just too stupid and full of myself to recognize that. So I really want to thank him for that, like someday in person. Because I always think about that when I do things now. Is am I taking myself down the wrong path?
What's funny about that is I think when as a storyteller, you almost, at least for me, I'm trying to find ways to complicate it up, right? Because I'm always thinking to myself, like, oh, it's too simple. I need to
Is it
have something
right?
more,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
But sometimes it does work better when it's a little bit more simple for the reader.
Right.
That's gotta be a hard tug of war, I guess, between what you want to do or what you think is going to work really well and what actually might work really, really well. That's a funny learning experience there to go
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. Because you want your story to be unique, right? You don't want it to be
Yeah,
like, oh, I've seen this already, or I've seen different spins on it. But sometimes that uh, inclination to be clever or whatever, you know, um, you can go way down the wrong path.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yep.
I get it. Ugh, I love that cover, by the way. There was
So we
something
start back
about
up?
just for a second, and then we can get rolling again. But besides the contrast of Daredevil being in the shadow of Morbius, I like uh, I like the white background, like the
Hmm.
Yeah.
negative
Hmm.
white background. Just something about the 90s used to do that a lot. They used to have a lot of white covers that just really popped. You don't see that a lot anymore because modern day colorists want to color everything up. And I get it. They got
Yep.
a job to do. They
Yep.
want to showcase their skills and everything. But sometimes that white cover just there's something about it. It's so attractive. I don't know why. I've always liked it though.
Yeah, Scott and
Yeah.
Pat worked really well. I know they are Sheldon. I mean, pretty much. I do a pretty good version, you know. So that sounds a little different, but the uh, but Pat and Scott worked really hard on like thinking about more unique covers. That which the
Hmm.
Chrysler
Yeah.
Building, or the Empire State Building,
Yeah,
being the
yeah.
one that
That was
really
an awesome one
set
too.
us off.
That was such a simple cover, and you got Daredevil as this tiny little speck, but there's just something so
Right.
impactful about that. Whether it was the white cover or the black cover that they put out as well, is just so
Hmm.
awesome.
Hmm. Yeah, it stood out, especially among a lot of the oversaturated covers, at that point, and that's
Oh
really the
yeah.
one that was so underordered because nobody, thought it was
Oh,
going to be. They thought the whole storyline, everything was going to be a nothing burger.
oh, jeez.
That became so in demand and was on the Wizard, whatever list
Yeah.
for months, and you could tell Wizard was getting sick of it because they got snarkier and snarkier, month after month. Like this thing
Reagan
again.
Wizard.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really interesting to me that when you have a series coming out that Marvel didn't either believe in it or didn't want to push it, and like you guys had to go and put your own money and stuff into advertising it. It's like, well, why even do it? It's like when a studio puts out a movie and they're like, this isn't going to do good. Let's just get it out. Let's get it over with and move on. Like I don't understand the thought process in that. Like, if it's not going to be good, if you don't think it's going to be good, don't make it. But if it's being made, at least go out and put your all into it, advertise it, make it a big thing,
Yeah,
hype it up.
but that's why we did what we did, because we did
Yeah,
believe in it. We did have that sense that like we were doing something, with the right energy and the right momentum, that it was
yeah,
worth putting some more skin in the game, as if we weren't putting enough. But ultimately, it did pay off, like taking that extra
yeah,
swing.
yeah. No, this is a fun
Yeah.
trip. Like I didn't have all these. I know I have at least a couple of these issues because, like I said, I wasn't really collecting a lot of Daredevil stuff back then. But I do remember when he hit the black costume, I started picking up
Hmm.
a couple stuff. Didn't really have any idea what was going on. Like a lot of my old books, I have no idea what they were
Right.
going on. I just picked them up because the art looked cool. I was like, oh, this is awesome. But this is a fun trip down memory lane when it comes to this. And I can't remember if it was who was it in the chat. I don't know if Wiley J Draws or somebody was just talking about like how modern comics are so disappointing sometimes, with there's obviously exceptions, but modern comics to a point overall comparative, if you came up, if you're in your 30s, 40s or whatever, you've been reading comics for a long time or whatever, it's so nice to kind of dive back into the old issues. We used to have a show called Appreciating Comic Book Art Live, which we'll probably do at some point again, but on that every week we would dive into just looking at our favorite comic books from when we were kids, and it's just so fun to take that trip down memory lane into these things, because you remember where you were at when you're reading this stuff. You remember like how much the story was impactful, or just like how much it was exciting to read this stuff back then, when it just seemed like there was more magic within the industry at the time, more energy or something. And I look at this and it definitely feels like much more just much more energy and love and care put into these books and some modern stuff, if that makes sense. I'm rambling a little bit, so I apologize everybody, but
Yeah,
trying to get a
Well,
thought out. It's not there.
why is that, do you think? I mean, I have my own sense of, again, some comics, they are awesome, great. There's no,
Yeah.
I'm envious of them, but certainly there are some that feel off beat. Is that just because people have now been raised on, well, this is what a comic is, and so they want to do more comics about people sitting around tables and talking, or what is it?
I
People
think
coming out of college that just want to be Netflix
yes, that's what I was,
executives, and this is their
Oh,
stepping stone to get to it. So it's just a product to put on their resume, which is a shame.
I second that. I think that back in the day, you had people making comics that loved comics, loved the storytelling of comics, and they got into comics and they started working on their favorite characters, or had a chance to work on their favorite characters or whatever. And you're telling those stories in that format, in that formula, because they know how to tell the story. And I think maybe, and I'm not in the industry, it's just my observation, but I think there are a lot of people that look at the comic book storytelling medium as a way to get a portfolio or something under their belts to take a step up to go into TV or go into something else. And they might not have that love and passion for comics, like some of the old creators did, and I think
right.
there's a legit, like you said, too much sitting around a table and having like this deep, you know, discussion about something. It's just like, that's not what comic book readers want, And I think that that's what it is, which is why when a comic book really steps up and gives you that sense of what you're looking for, like Black Armor was great. It was a nice, kind of nostalgia feel of like, this is what a comic book should be. People dig that kind of stuff. Whereas modern day books, they just kind of fall flat. Like a little bit of no passion. Who is it? Yeah, Wiley J. Gerald. It just like seems like there's no passion,
Yeah,
right?
passion, sure.
Yeah.
Good.
What's your thoughts, though? I mean, I know you said you have your theory.
Well, I sometimes just wonder, if when people start to see that, that's what they think a comic is, and they emulate it. They don't look for the bigger skills. It's just like when an artist who has never done any, I'll say, classical training, and their only training is drawing from, say, comics.
Right.
It becomes, the approach degrades itself. If you don't know where the muscles attached to the bones and so forth, you just start to draw things all over the place. And maybe the storytelling, ends up in the same way. If you haven't really watched the right movies, if you haven't read the right comics, if you haven't read the right books, you don't understand or think about, like, how to reach for that same thing yourself. There was you guys know a guy named Ira Glass used to run a
Sounds familiar.
documentary show on NPR. I think it was called All Things
Okay.
Considered, and really good.
Oh,
He'd
yeah.
find he'd find stories, and he'd unpack them and tell them, and he had a quote, which I will mangle badly, and I will not do my impersonation, because it would not sound like anything like the other two. But he always had this quote about taste, and the thing was, when you're young and you're getting into like creative arts or whatever, you have great taste, and and you understand the books and the comics and the movies that are wonderful, and you reach for that taste, but you don't have it yet. You don't have the ability to get there, and so many people bail on trying to achieve that. You know, they know what they want to become because they have that great taste, but
Yeah.
they just bail on it, and they either give up completely and don't do anything creative, or they settle for that in between spot. And the people who really push themselves, ultimately catch up, with that ability, with their ability catches up with their taste. And I think that's very true. I think that you have to constantly be um, rethinking and re-reaching to make yourself better on that front. I mean, I feel that way about myself. I know even things that I was doing that weren't related to comics, um, where I had to achieve a certain level of discipline, made me better equipped when I now have gotten back into doing some comics.
I wonder if the the rise of the freelance writer, artist, and not the studio bullpen or whatever had
Mm.
something to do with that because when you're coming up through these companies and you're in-house for the most part and you're coming up through the business and you're learning the business and you're on a book, whatever you end up doing, you learn firsthand. And
Mm-hmm.
then you got the freelance starts and boom, boom, boom. Now you got guys that are, like look at us, we're independents. We never stepped foot in the industry at all. We're just kind of trying to mimic and do what we've seen, and try to
Mm-hmm.
learn as best as we can. So yeah, maybe there is a degrading when it comes to the storytelling because it's like a copy of a copy of a copy will
Mm-hmm.
eventually break down and not be like as pure as the original, and that could be just the change overall in the industry when that happened in the late 90s or
Mm-hmm.
when they kind of started really pulling away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting thought.
Yeah, I mean, and it different strokes, on different folks, for the way they approach it. But
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be in the industry, to have achieved that. Again, I think it's about um, reaching for making yourself better, or just reinventing
Yeah.
yourself because you want to. I mean, I know there's a lot of people currently like picking on Frank Miller's art
Mm,
style, right? He's done like a
Oh,
right.
bunch of covers, and I don't know if he's done a full
Yeah.
new book, but it's like they're like dissing on like some of his covers, and
Yeah.
to me, it's like I think it's marvelous. Like to me, it's like
mhm,
dude's doing what he wants, right? He's
Yep.
got license to do it, and he's trying out something new, um, because that's where he wants to take his artwork. So he's earned his ability, his cred to do that, and he's not settling on, well, this is what I did 15, 20 years ago. So maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but why wouldn't you want to try and see
sure.
where it takes you?
No, I'll agree with that 100%. And I'm not a huge fan of the stuff he's doing these days, but
Mhm.
like Sin City was probably some of my favorite stuff he ever did. And, I'm a fan.
Right.
So I have the ability to choose and pick of my favorite works of his. But I do agree with you. What you're saying there is that nowadays, um, art critics, right? It seems
Mhm.
like they try to fit everybody within like the, uh, more realistic stuff, right? And like if something truly
Mhm.
unique comes along, it just kind of gets shunned these days. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or whatever it is, but that's what I
Right.
love so much about the 70s, 80s, 90s decades is that there was a lot of different experimental art styles. I mean, like this,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
this a lot of artists I could go down the board and name, and that's what made comics so great because you had these guys with the willingness and the want to go out and do something unique and different and have a different art style. And I feel like too
Right.
much stuff today is the kind of digital kind of similar
Mhm.
style that you see, and it doesn't have anything to do with digital. It's just a stylistic stuff that just it's kind of boring, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, uh, yeah, we can diss on that all day. We'll leave it alone.
That's the truth. So this is 320, this is 325, right, Sean?
Yep,
Yeah,
wrapping it
this
up.
yeah,
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
so
yep.
wrapping it up. What's the thing and I meant to since I haven't really read the story. So now we get into the real or we've gotten into the real Electra here with the shaved head, right? Now we have
Yep.
like what an
Yep.
imposter Electra that's going on that she
The
fights.
that's what drags her down from the mountain. Like
Okay.
they find the essence of the old Electra inside this character Garrett's head, like the cyborg
Oh,
that
okay.
she teamed up with from Electra Assassin. So there's a remnant of that, assassin character left over. The hand pulls that remnant out, creates this thing called Ahrent, which is like the evil Electra, and
Nice.
they're going to use that to sort of, drive their initiative, and that's what she comes down to, to defeat. But by killing it, again, she has to absorb that essence back into herself. So it's not like she, flips a switch back to
Okay.
being, just Electra Assassin again, but
That makes sense.
it just taints her. It sort of says all that work you did purifying yourself and going up to the mountain is what ruins you again. And then and then at the point in the story where we've screwed up Matt Murdock's life again, for one reason or another, he chooses uh, to go with the idea he's been killed in this incident,
Yeah.
because
Hold up there, Sean.
otherwise, his friends will be uh, at risk. The usual old excuse.
Right.
And then takes on that Jack Batlin persona, which is where things come into like black armor and such. He's still in
Yeah.
that world. So, but this is a lovely shot. This is a great.
What a
fantastic-
gesture! What a
I was going to say,
composition. Yeah.
what a great shot to end the run on with this. And I do like that you bring in, we were talking about before with Born Again, where they kind of stepped away from the Catholicism when it comes to the character. And you go
Mhm.
through this entire story, and you get Matt now in the church and doing his thing. And it's just, it's a
Right.
good ending. Right now, he gets up on the buildings or whatever, does that kind of like Christ-like pose and jumps. Like it's
Yep.
good symbolism, some fun, just a good way to wrap up the story. That's awesome. Like this feels like a good solid, hopeful ending, getting ready to go into the next story arc. And yeah, like this is the way it should end.
I was taking
Yeah,
so many
exactly.
mental shots of the choreography of of what Scott was doing and how you wrote it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, snap, snap, snap. That's going in type 1.
Yeah, no, he did a banger job, and it was. I mean, this shot was in my mind when I wrote the last shot of Black
Nice.
Armor, and I don't think Netho was. It's a nice little homage, to it. I
Yeah.
don't think he was looking at it, but it was that same feeling I was trying to go for, and he captured it so nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a fun trip down memory lane. Sean says, I understand when artists have to keep experimenting with their work. I don't always like
Yeah.
it, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's totally understandable and respectable. But that's what artists have to do. But you're not always going to like it, and they may not like it either. Like
Right.
sometimes you do something. I'm reading this great book right now by Rick Rubin, the music producer.
Oh,
produced
yes.
like everything under the sun, and he's got this book on creativity, and he's talking about working with musicians and such. And it's just sometimes people will do stuff that they think is going to be the number one hit, and they're going to love it, and it doesn't go anywhere. And then they start
Mhm.
off with the thing they don't think is going to be anything, and it becomes something huge, for them artistically
Yeah.
or monetarily. But you have to play it out.
Yeah, no, 100%. Let's jump. Sorry, guys. Every once in a while, it catches up with me, and I can't stop the cough.
Can't stop the feeling.
Unprofessional. Can't
Exactly.
stop the feeling. So with Dan being here, he has got
Yes.
a new Kickstarter coming out here. Let's talk about this a little bit for a second. What we got going
Yeah.
on with this?
Please. Well, Axel's Infernals, this idea I've had for a while and a long time, like I'm talking like 20 years, or more. And
Oh,
I come
nice.
up with this artist Carl Waller, who you see some of his crazy stuff here. And the whole idea behind Axel's Infernal is that everybody thinks of hell, right? Well, you think when I say, what do you think about hell, Joe? You think of a guy with pitchforks and and Sean some
Place with
horns.
burning fire.
Yeah, exactly. So that is one hell, right? But there are in fact many hells. Every culture has had a different hell. The Aztecs have had a hell. The
Yep.
Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, different Native American tribes. Everybody's had a different kind of hell. So the thinking behind this story was that, well, nobody remembers all those hells, and so but those hells desperately want to be remembered. There's
Oh,
power
gotcha.
in belief, and so to get people to believe in their hells, they've come up with something called the Underworld Transportation Authority, where they literally deliver parts of hell, their hells to Earth via a trucking system, big rigs, 18-wheelers. And then they want people to literally believe in their hell again. But to make this happen, they can't just send a bunch of demons to Earth with these things for whatever interdimensional rules or whatever we make up. They have
Right.
to hire or like basically kidnap human drivers who have got sin on their books to become their drivers. And this one woman you're seeing right here, Percy Cross, is our main character. And she gets shanghaied into the service of this underworld transportation authority. And, for some right reasons, a lot of wrong ones. And she has to suddenly, become part of this trucking system, delivering hell, but also at the same time try to figure out a way to get excuse the pun, the hell out of here, right? So
Yeah.
it's the job from hell. It's a hell of a good time. I can just keep going with this. But we did the first issue about a year and a half ago, I guess, at this point, and got funded on Kickstarter. It was nicely produced, 24-page comic. Set things up, put it in motion. She starts down this road. And then we've got the second issue done. Like Carl has penciled the whole issue. Wes Wong is doing these crazy dynamic colors. He's
good
colored
stuff.
half the issue. Pat Rousseau is our letterer, who's an Emmy Eisner nominated, letterer I've known a while. He's doing a great job with it. We haven't produced all those pages yet. But the book again is fully done. I mean, I've written all 5 issues of the miniseries. And so we're kind of ahead. But if people get on board with this, there's no risk this is not going to come out, right? We just have to basically pay Wes, who's very fast, and Pat, who's very fast, to kind of finish those things off and get it out there. It's got original artwork as the rewards. It's got digital copies, print copies, posters, stickers, a bunch of cool stuff. But right now it's in pre-launch because while the first issue got funded, it kind of just made it over that line. And what I'm trying to do, and what you guys are doing me a favor here, and I respect and appreciate that, is, I want a little more attention on it this time out before I pull the launch trigger.
Sure.
And, just to sort of like help us out. The funding is not going to be as big as the first one. There was a lot of, additional expenses on the first one, logo design and some other things that we did. But those will probably all be eaten up by new paper costs and anything anyway. Exactly. I'm still in that slogan. Dude.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm writing that down right now.
I like it.
And but it is it's fun. I look at it as like a crazy, Sam Raimi film. It's sort of like, The Evil Dead, meets From Dusk Till Dawn with a little bit of The Good Place like thrown in for good measure. It gets to, you guys have, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. I think I sent you guys.
Yeah, I read the first one. I read the first one. I liked it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know because I sometimes live in a vacuum. So but a lot of times I live in a vacuum. But it's a story that I said it's been with me for a long time, and I really wanted to kind of come to life. I'm a big believer in the idea, and I read this in this book, Big Magic, a number of years ago. It always stuck with me that ideas are things. They're like they actually kind of exist. In a metaphysical way. And they will come to you. Like this story came to me like that. Like Carl called me one night. We were working on this Dark Horse series together, and it was winding down, and we were trying to figure out a new way to do something. And Carl's a great guy, but he's all over the place. Like he's got 1,000 ideas, and none of them always met. So and he may not remember this the same way, but it's burned into my memory. So I'm talking to you right now.
That's
He calls
right.
me up
Yeah.
and he's like, he says, well, what if there was like, these truckers, and they're like, and they're jumping dimensions, and there's some kind of like, like sexy strippers, and that was about it. And I was like, and I was like, good talk, bro. And and Carl, I don't know what to do with that really, and so we hung the phone up, we ended the conversation, and literally like almost the second I hung it up, like all this shit started pinging around in my brain. Like all these books I read about hell from when I was doing Hellraiser or whatever else. it just all started to kind of like to come together, and I started freeform writing, and I put together this giant proposal and this multi-issue storyline. Like, I know where the story goes after like, we got a 5-issue series here. We might have a 6-issue series after that.
Oh, nice.
You know, but ultimately it ends. Like, I knew everything. I knew all the characters.
Nice.
I knew the whole thing. And so I believe that these ideas come to you, but
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't do something with them, they're going to say, thank you very much. We're going to go somewhere else. And
That's
so I
good.
feel like we've held on to this idea way too long. And I actually lost touch with Carl for a long time. And when I called him back, you know, after many years, and we reconnected, we almost simultaneously said the same thing, which was like, do you remember that story about that girl, you know, in hell? And it just said to me, this thing wants to be told. And if I don't do it
Yeah.
now, it's going to show up on somebody else's screen. It's going to, you know, somebody else is going to tell it. And
Right.
I want to be the one to tell it. Like, I want it to be out there. And, you know, the more I spend time with her, you know, the more real she is. And
Right.
so I'm having a great time. I think, you know, from what you're seeing, the energy or whatever in the story,
That's
you know,
looking good.
it just keeps plussing itself. So if any folks on here want to check it out, obviously a pre-launch, you're not committing to anything. You're just putting your, you know, your
Yeah.
word out there. And then it's, you know, you'll get early bird notice when we do launch. You'll be able to get in on some of the, you know, advanced pricing and some of the other, you know, maybe early bird rewards, if that's of interest to you. But I also just want you to have a good time with a good comic.
Yeah, I
And
do
we'll
have
be pimping
the
you out when it comes out. So don't
Yeah.
worry about that. For
in
sure.
chat. I do have the link to the project pinned up on the top of the chat on YouTube. So please go and visit that. Hit the notify me on launch and everything, and follow this. As you guys all know, I mean, we love Dan here. We're a big supporter of his, you know, so I'm definitely gonna be back in the book when it comes out, and we'll definitely have you back on when it's actually live
Thanks,
and
guys.
everything.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
I did read the first issue and I really liked it. The art was
Yep.
great. I liked the story. I like even more with you going into more in depth and just breaking down with the hell
Right.
thing. It's a cool concept. I dig that.
Yeah.
You know what I also like, Dan? I like the fact that it's a good theory. I never thought about it
Mhm.
before, that an idea could leave you and go to somebody else. Because how often do we see very similar ideas that people have bouncing all
Yeah.
around? You know, like
Yeah.
that's an interesting thought. Like, yeah, so get on it. If you guys have an idea, yeah, don't take too long. Get on it and do it.
No, it will leave you, and it will say goodbye. But I think I really believe that. I mean, I've come to, you know, just feel that that's a real metaphysical thing, and you've got to, like, you know, run with it. Thank you, Sheldon.
He said you had me at sexy strippers.
Yeah, exactly.
Dennis Kelly says, so glad to make the show. Love this DD and love Dan's Nick Fury stuff too.
Yes.
Man,
Hell
thank you. That's a sad reminder right today. I just found out Butch Geist.
Oh,
passed
yes.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just saw that right before we went live.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
guy, great artist.
Yeah, definitely RIP on that.
Mhm.
Let's take a look at this trailer real quick. Let me pop this up here.
The good news is no one needs to worry about going to hell. The not so good news, we're bringing it right to your doorstep. My name is Percy Cross, and I work for the Underworld Transportation Authority. Every culture has a version of down below, and every bad place wants attention. So we truck the Inferno on 5 axles of a possessed rig that calls herself Smokin' Sammy. Damnation delivered overnight and across dimensions for all faiths and every sinner. I share the wheel with a co-driver named Virgil, covered in scars, sigils, secrets, and swinging a mean crowbar. I've got a demonic dispatcher out for my soul, and a road ahead full of ruin and menace. Maybe these assholes think this girl's just going along for the ride, but I didn't ask for this gig. So when I find my way out, there will be hell to pay.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
That's a pretty good trailer, man.
That's a really good trailer.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good trailer. Yeah. Who did that?
I did that.
You did that? You put that? Wow. Damn.
I went to film school, guys. You know, it's like I gotta.
I'm gonna start coming to you.
All right, cool.
Yeah. I'm gonna hit you up for the next trailer I need.
Absolutely.
Damn, that was
you get one gratis, man. Whatever.
hell yeah. No, that was sick. That was awesome. Guys, definitely like I said, link is pinned up up above. Go check that out. Hail Lore is dropping links in the chat as well. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Little Michael Golden influence this art. Nice.
Yeah.
See that?
I would say so.
We did have a super chat that I missed, and I forgot. I got to play. There's
a super chat, motherfucker.
There we go. I can't do it without playing that. Sheldon Martin for $4.99. Appreciate you, brother. Member of the channel says this might have already been asked, but how did you get paired up with Scott?
That's a good question, but that's serendipity. That's another big word. When Lee Weeks left the book after Daredevil 300, you know, I assumed Lee and I were going to keep cooking because we were like, you know, synced up and so when he left, I was really surprised. But he just felt 300 was a perfect time to go. You know, he had made his mark. It was a great high watermark to go out on, and that was smart. You know, and certainly I think from his perspective. So Scott was like a roll of the dice on Ralph's part. You know, Glenn Herdling, who was an assistant editor at Marvel, was I think a childhood friend of Scott's, and knew that Scott wanted to make that transition from what he was doing, like I said, an engineer to artist, and introduced him to Ralph, who after Lee was off the book, you know, was looking for a Daredevil replacement. We tried to score a young Ron Garney, who was playing hard to get. And Ron, you know, Ron had done a couple of issues, and but he was, you know, couldn't win him over. And then Ralph decided to take a chance on Scott. So that was, you know, just kind of being teamed up with somebody by chance, but ultimately ended up working really well. Like I said, I trusted Scott with everything after a certain point.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yes, fire for sure.
Hell yeah. Share that link.
Yeah, share the link, guys. Make sure you check it out, follow it, share it around, let people know that this thing is coming out, and definitely back it when it comes out. I think it'll be very good, and you guys won't regret it.
Go to other people's shows, drop the link in their chat. I always say it's okay. Nobody's going to get mad.
Yeah.
Your favorite shows. So do that. Thanks.
And also, I'm going to give you a couple names to get a hold of, Dan, to see if you can get on their shows and advertise as well after the show ends, just to get you some more exposure and everything for that. Guys, before we get out of here, Sean, you do have something you said you wanted to share with everybody that's Type 1 related.
Yeah, just finished a page today. Let me see if I can zoom in. Ooh. This is towards the end of the book. Strees gets to the bad guy, Lord Aramis's base. Nothing smartly about it, but this is scrolling pretty slow. So he's in his tough guy phase. You know, he's got his cool little stuff. He does like a ninja, like jumping. And Dan Kemp's going to color it all like, woo-ha, woo-ha, I got you all in check. And then these are some goons I just made up because they're going to get their ass whooped in the next page, and just maybe throwaway characters. But again,
characters.
Yeah, you know, just make them up like because it's like G.I. Joe. They're all toys. So, you know, just Dan's going to color them up great. And then here's a page that we showed off the other day. Thank you. That's Strees. And my villain, one of the main villains, Lord Aramis. So we're like 9 pages away from finishing on my end. An action and adventure tale, like with real life implications that face off the terrorists from the past. You know my spiel. Find out why the mysterious Type 1 armor chose Thomas the Heart, and what connection it has to the 9 Lords of the Night from the Mayan Aztec lore, and why Thoth of the Anunnaki created these safeguard armors centuries ago to protect us from false gods and beyond. All in the pages of Type 1. Live on Indiegogo or in demand. Please back it. We're so close to 10K. And I got some awesome covers from very talented friends.
Yeah. Awesome. Get on it, everybody. Links are down below. And definitely whenever it happens, get the Joe Sonntag face cover because
Exactly.
you need that.
Yeah, by the end of the month, we'll have everything figured out when we'll reboot the page. But we're getting there.
Oh,
Great
Mark's making a
covers. Looks
camp.
awesome.
Yeah, very very blessed. I actually blackmailed most of them. I'm like, hey, you remember when we went out and you guys did that to that one certain
That works. Yeah,
Covers.
that works.
that's what you got to do. That is what you got to do. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Dan, a pleasure as always with you coming
Yes,
on.
sir.
Always a
Thank you,
good
guys.
conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like we have. So welcome anytime. We'll definitely have you back on for the next time when your book goes live. But just anytime you want to come on and shoot the shit with us, it's a pleasure. Like I said, just talking to you, having a good time.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, you guys are always fun. It really is a conversation. Like it's not like, oh, I'm, a performing or question and answer. So I really appreciate that.
And we hate interviews. Like that's just Sean and I do. Like we're not interviewers and like we're not deep questions and all this stuff. We just want to have a good, organic conversation and have some fun.
Yep.
And that's what we do on the show. So and you fit right in. So we appreciate you. Chat, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Remember to join me on Sunday at 8 p.m. is the new time for the Ronan Joe show. I just sit here with the chat. We shoot the shit. We talk about some pop culture stuff. And then Monday at 9 p.m. we have the Spawn review. I haven't figured out what we're looking at yet, but be back here. What are we doing next week, Sean?
Do you want to look at the toy, the unboxing of the figure, the medieval Spawn
Well,
figure?
for the Spawn review, we could do that.
Yeah.
All right. We got to figure out what we're doing for Odd and Stuff next
for Odd
week.
Stuff 249.
Yeah, because we're almost to our 250th episode in our 5-year anniversary.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
Crazy.
So
That's wild.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure all that out.
Yeah. We're under the gun type of guys. We're like deadlines.
I'm like, what's that?
What's that?
But thank you everybody for joining us. We're gonna run our short outro, and then we will talk to you all later. We'll see you on Sunday. And I say this all the time, and I'll say it tonight because, like I always do, be good to each other, take care of one another, and as always, picture me naked. Talk to y'all later. Peace.